Hello and welcome back. I'm Sean. This is the Mountains Garage YouTube channel, where today we're continuing on my personal street/race Powerglide transmission for my 64 Dodge Dart LS Swap single turbo cheap project. Cheap is relative, for sure. In today's video, we're going to finish the front pump. When I posted the video on Friday, just as soon as I finished, the mail truck came with 2 sets of pump gears from Sonex, and now I can assemble the front pump. So I'm going to do that first, go over a couple things, and then we need to talk about the input shaft, which seems really simple. However, like all things, it gets complicated in a hurry. Information, I've looked for it, and I don't want to brag, but this may be the only time you're going to hear it all in one spot. So things have changed over the years. The manuals that were printed are great sources of information, but there's more parts available now, different options. Again, I'll do my best to make it as simple and understandable as I can. I bought 2 sets of pump gears from 2 different places, hoping one would show up before the other. They showed up at the same time. They're the same lot number. Unfortunately, not made in America, but hey, it's what we got. Sonex is one of the highest quality producers there is, so if they're good enough for them, they're good enough for me. On the right are my original pump gears. On the left are the brand new Sonex gears. I'm fortunate to have the original set. I was able to mic the width, and I already know that the replacement gears are identical. In the old service manuals, they tell you a adequate test to see if your gears are wore out, if you can't tell by looking at them, is to assemble the gears inside each other like this and pull on them, and they should be able to travel across the bench. My old set, nope, won't do it. So while they look fine, other than being soaked in evaporust and they've changed color, they're probably not suitable for service, and this was probably a good $22 or $3 spent. Installation direction of the gears, starting with the inner, you can see this step that's cut into it. That's going to go down. That's the original gear. Same thing, the aftermarket gears on the side away from the torque converter, the original ones were flush. The replacement gear isn't. But if you can see the wear mark, that's as far in as the torque converter went on the gear. You can see the wear mark. So the fact that it doesn't go all the way up flush on this side doesn't play a factor. So that one is going to go down just like that. Obviously you put it in second, but the outer gear, my original one had a larger chamfer right here on one side than the other, and that would have gone down. The new gear is identical either side. There's no dots or markings on it. You can put this either way. Using a feeler gauge to check the pump gear fitment, you need 3 to 6 thousandths on the outside of the big gear, between that and the pump. Between the outer gear and the crescent, you want 3 to 9 thousandths, and the depth here should be 1/2 a thousandths to 1 thousandths lower than this surface. And now for the main attraction, the input shaft. All Powerglides were built with a coarse spline where it slides into the turbine on the torque converter. All Powerglide torque converters had a turbine bushing, and no Powerglides had a stator bushing in the end of the pump. The spline on the stator tube is identical between a Powerglide and a turbohydromatic 350 or 400. So somebody got the bright idea. If you used a turbo spline here, you could run a TH350 or TH400 torque converter in your Powerglide. That's great. However, TH350 and TH400 torque converters do not have a bushed turbine in the converter, and they need a stator bushing. So you need a special stator tube that will accept a bushing. This one it's a Sonex. And you'd also need a input shaft with a machined area to ride on the bushing. And in this case, due to the fact it's a solid shaft, they've cut a spiral out around there for your converter return oil. I have a bushed torque converter. I will not be running a stator bushing, so my choice of input shaft will have nothing to do with the machined area where the stator bushing would ride. Powerglide input shafts were specific to the gear set, either 176, which made for a 12 7/8 long shaft, or a 1.82, which made for a 12 5/8 shaft. So when aftermarket input shafts came out, they came in 2 different lengths. You can probably still buy them in 2 different lengths. That is until somebody got smart and decided to split the difference, call it a combo shaft. It's 12 3/4, both of these, and they'll fit any gear set. When choosing a Powerglide input shaft, you have to decide whether you want rings. Stock had 2 rings. Here's a nice replacement shaft with 2 rings. And here's a replacement shaft with only 1 ring. And you can also buy a ringless shaft. What does the ring do? In order to cover that, we need to trace the flow of oil in and out of the torque converter. If you watched the last video on the front pump, you already know this is my converter charge passage. I've restricted it with a brass set screw drilled to 1/8 inch. And pressurized oil is going to exit this hole, travel around the stator tube inside the converter hub. That's my extended converter hub. So that's how the oil gets into the torque converter. It does its magic, multiplies torque, it gets hot. Return oil is going to come back down inside the stator tube. If we're running a front stator bushing, in this case it's a solid shaft, there's that spiral I talked about. Return oil has to go past the front stator bushing. If you're running one, I'm not going to run one, so I have a free flow. It's an advantage in a Turbo 400 as well to leave it out if you have a bush converter for the same reason. You're expediting the flow. But back to the Powerglide, hot return oil from the torque converter is going to come down and hit the top seal, the top ring. If you remember from the video yesterday, that 11 o'clock hole, that's where the hot oil is going to head for the lower fitting on the transmission case. It's going to come down the tube, out this passage. I can show you on the dirty pump the exact travel path. I'm glad I didn't wash this because it shows it very clearly. Here's the hot exiting oil headed for the cooler, the lower fitting on the transmission. Got to pass through the pump gasket, the case, and out the lower fitting. Here's your bypass. Should more than a 30-pound restriction-ish show up in the cooler circuit, this is going to open right into the return. Here's the return, the upper fitting on the case. You can trace it right around here. And it's going to go back down inside the tube around the input shaft and end up between the rings. And there's a hole to accept it, and there's an exit hole here and inside here. This is going to lubricate the lower gear set. This is going to lubricate the sun gear. So pressurized lube oil now makes its way. Unfortunately, in a Powerglide, we're only talking 5 inches worth of lubrication requirements. Your lower gear set is right here. Here's the aftermarket twin ring shaft, same idea. Pressurized lube oil. Coming back, it's cooled. It's ready to do its job as lube oil. This also has exits here and in the end of the shaft. So a 2-ring shaft will offer stock style cooling. So you should not have overheating problems in the transmission. The problem is the 2 rings weaken the shaft. Now metal has come a long ways in 20 or 30 years of making aftermarket shafts. And this 2-ring shaft is rated 1,000 horsepower. So most builders will say if the power level allows it, a 2-ring shaft will make a much better, a lot more people are street driving their race cars. Cooling of the transmission could become a problem. The 1-ring shaft, same idea. Oil has to get back to lubricate. They've cut long grooves on both sides. They're trying to make the shaft stronger. On this groove, oil drops down to get into the gear set. But without this ring, oil's free to flow. Maybe this is more efficient. Maybe this is more efficient. Either way, in both cases with the front ring, we know it's going out to the cooler in the back. And this has been tested, and they claim it provides adequate lubrication to your gear set and everything else, and it's an absolute drop-in, the 1-ring shaft where a 2-ring shaft was. I spoke to BTE, which makes this shaft several times, and they assured me this is a proven combination and will not have any detrimental effects. So now let's talk a ringless shaft. With the ringless shaft, you need a special stator bushing, and instead of rings, the shaft is going to be solid with no grooves, because these are an area where the shaft wants to break. I think I mentioned that. But the ring grooves, they studied broken input shafts, and they want to snap off right where that groove is. It's a pre-weakened spot, that plus the holes drilled and everything. So the shaft has minimal holes drilled. You get way back here. This area is still solid. It's also much thicker than this one by like 60 thousandths. A very rugged shaft. Choices are made. Now, the ringless, instead of the ring, they run 2 bushings, trying to duplicate what the rings do. So oil will return from the converter. It's hopefully going to be steered by that bushing out to the cooler, and then come back, and the other bushing is going to guide it for lube oil. I don't have one. Research tells me that the ringless shaft, while really strong, is not the best choice for street driving, although people do it. Sometimes you'll see where they wonder why they don't have any cooler flow. Their cooler is not hot, but the transmission is. I almost guarantee you it's something to do with the ringless shaft. So at a power level, in a Powerglide, you need the strength of the ringless shaft. However, you might have cooler problems, so something to think of. The giant shafts, they make the big shaft kits, which have a different drive hub. This splines into the drive hub in the high clutch drum. This splines into the sun gear bushing, dubbed the wedding band, which floats on the splines inside the sun gear. That would move inside. So once you go big input shaft, you need a special larger stator tube and your special pump. Basically, you need the whole kit. You can't just grab one item and make it fit. Same goes with the Turbo 400 size output shaft. Everything from there back needs to be bigger, exiting the gear set. So, all things to consider. Just look at the length of the input shaft. You can see why these are weak. Same story with the output shaft compared to like a Turbo 400. This is like a giraffe's neck. I mentioned that before. Whereas the Turbo 400, short and stout. I find it interesting that the 1-ring BTE shaft is a part number 2519. The 2-ring transmission specialty shaft is a 2520. All right, I hope that all made sense. If it didn't, I'm sorry. Go back and rewatch it, ask questions, do what you need to do so you understand. I am now free to assemble the transmission. I was excited yesterday, my pump gears, and I'd ordered some pan bolts, some Allen-headed pan bolts, and that all showed up Saturday. So I am free to go. I actually, in lieu of assembling, I wanted to just cover this before I buried all the parts. And I'll also do an assembly video. It goes really fast in a Powerglide because there's just not that much stuff to put in there. So I'm excited to put it together, get it off my bench, because I have some other work that needs to be done this week. Back to the Turbo 400s. For me, anyway. Like, share, subscribe. Please, we're almost at 3,000 subscribers, which is awesome. I started the year with 1,000, and now I'm up to 3. That's steady growth. If I continue like that or better, that'd be great. So spread the word. Still really impressed with the internet experience because, as you know, it can be, a rough place. But I started this program. I tried to just stay honest and humble, and which is who I am, and just tell it like it is and tell you as much information as I possibly can. Again, I don't blow stuff up yet, on purpose anyway, and not probably going to see anything really exciting and spectacular here. Just trying to share the wealth of knowledge with other people, from the little guy just starting out to somebody that's unsure of it. It's really rewarding when people say, hey, you helped me. That's awesome. So have a great rest of your weekend, however short they may be, and I'll catch you in a couple days.